Hi, good morning, everyone, and greetings from the U.S. Embassy here in Athens, over here at our annex. It's wonderful to see you all. My name is Shanadit Surendra. I'm the Cultural and Educational Affairs Officer here at the Embassy. We're so excited this morning to be having this event in coordination with Study in Greece, some of our fantastic partners. We're very excited to continue the conversations that we have been having with so many of you over the last many years regarding opportunities for collaboration between the United States and Greece in the education space. We're very lucky to have with us today an expert in this field, Jennifer Evanuik, who is with Georgia State University. So we're going to have two sessions. The first session is a broader session on internationalization, trends, things that you all can be doing on your end to attract more US students and to forge more partnerships. And then we are going to have a more specialized session afterward, focusing specifically on NAFSA, which is the world's largest international education expo, and that will be held in New Orleans this May. And many of you, I understand, will be attending, which is very exciting. If you're not planning on attending, I encourage you to still consider there is still time to register for this year. So once again, we're really happy to be here, happy to have you here. At this point, I'll turn things over to Theo so that he can lead the session. Thank you.
So thank you, Shana. Thank you, Marina. Thank you all for joining us for today's event. Today it is a special event because we're hosted by the U.S. Embassy in Athens. And we have the pleasure and privilege to host this event in collaboration with them. At this point, I would like to express my heartfelt gratitude to the members of the U.S. Embassy for their contribution, significant contribution, and commitment to our mission and vision to advance U.S.-Greek academic ties and more broadly to our internationalization endeavors all these years. So we have the privilege to have with us Dr. Jennifer Evanuik. Dr. Evanuik is the Senior Director of International Initiatives at Georgia State University. She is a world-renowned internationalization strategist and consultant. She sits on the board of world-renowned institutions and organizations like the NAFSA, IIE. You also cooperate with the IIE, I think. And I think that we can give the floor to Jennifer to provide her insights on a range of topics like the capacity building for internationalization, the attraction of US students to Greece, and then she will also induct us. She will delve into the NAFSA event and the way the fair and conference would be beneficial to participants. So Jennifer, welcome to Athens. The floor is yours.
Thank you so much. Hello, everybody. Thank you for attending this session. I am really excited to have the opportunity to share with you some of my insights on how you can increase your partnerships and your capacity to host US students and how you can work more closely with US universities. Marina, can you pull up the slideshow? I also really want to thank the embassy here in Athens for hosting me this week. I have had the great opportunity to visit, I think, 6 different public universities here. So I know I haven't gotten to see all of the diversity among your universities, but I'm glad I got to see a few. And I'm sure those of you on the webinar represent the other universities that I haven't seen. So I hope to get to meet you in the future. And I've been really impressed with what I've learned so far about your higher education system. So I'm really excited about the potential to continue to increase those collaborations. You can move forward. You can move forward. Okay, so I have a lot of information here. I'm not going to go through each slide in great detail just for the sake of time, but I believe you will have this entire presentation made available to you. So you will get all of the details. And this is being recorded as well. So what I wanted to do was share with you some trends that we are seeing from the US in terms of our student outbound mobility, just to give you a sense of where things stand and to inform your own strategy when thinking about hosting American students. So every year there is a survey done of US universities from the national level to understand where our students are going for study abroad. It's called Open Doors. And last year, my date's wrong, it was the 2022 report, showed that Greece is the #8 destination in the world for US study abroad students. So that is, I mean, you're already in a great position, right? Greece has an amazing reputation in the United States. There's definitely interest on the part of our students to come here. So I think that's something for you to really leverage. The actual number of students who came was about 4,500, and it actually had reached its peak before COVID. It was over 5,000 students who studied here. So now, despite the fact that we have so many efforts on our side going into creating opportunities for our students to study abroad, when you look at it nationally, we still have only about 6% of the entire undergraduate student population in the US who actually study abroad at some point during their degree. So this just shows, there's still a lot of work to be done on our end to make this possible, but it also shows how much opportunity there is to increase the numbers of students going abroad in general, and certainly to come here. An important thing to note, though, is because I realized in the European sort of Erasmus tradition, there's kind of this historical emphasis on semester exchange programs. And while we do have still a number of students who do semesters abroad or who do an exchange program, this is only about a third of the type of activity that students do. So about 65% of students right now who go abroad are doing these shorter summer programs. So it might be a program that's 2 weeks, 3 weeks long, or maybe they go abroad for a spring break, which would be like now at this time of year in the US academic calendar. So we really are seeing a trend towards short summer experiences, still some opportunity for semester exchange, and then only about 2% of students actually go abroad for an academic year. Another thing to note is that participation and interest in what we call experiential programs is increasing. So these are things like internships, research, field work, independent study, service learning, community engaged learning. It's a priority in general in the US to have our students be able to have these very applied experiences that they get out of the classroom and can really put what they've learned to work. And so we're seeing that translate into what students do when they study abroad as well. I just quickly included this data, which was collected by IIE, the Institute for International Education. They did a study a few years ago on graduate student mobility, because that's not a population that we tend to focus on when we're talking about international education. So they just kind of benchmarked where things stood. And in 2016 anyway, about 3.5% of US graduate students were studying abroad. And the main thing I wanted to point out here is that 87% of those who did were abroad for 8 weeks or less. So again, you see that trend in having a shorter experience abroad. And just a couple other relevant trends that kind of shape what's happening in international education is that we continue to see enrollment in foreign language classes decline. Now, we know students don't really have the opportunity to study Greek in the US, so it might not be exactly relevant, but I think what this shows is that because we have less students who are continuing their language studies when they get to college, we have less students who are able to do those very immersive study abroad activities, right? So this kind of, I think, is what's also feeding the trend towards short-term study abroad. And then another important thing to note is the really big increase in institutions utilizing virtual exchange. So this is also sometimes called COIL, or Collaborative Online International Learning. I know that from EAIE, the European Association of International Education, they've been talking about virtual exchange even before the pandemic. But we're also seeing more US universities, including these short-term, it's where two professors might have overlapping modules in their classes and they meet via Zoom, right? They might have asynchronous and synchronous sessions where their students get to collaborate on projects or have discussions and compare and contrast what they see in their two different cultural perspectives. So that can really add a great dimension to the students' experience. So even though it's not mobility based and will never replace the actual physical mobility part of international education, it's yet another tool that is effective. I mean, it's not free in the sense that you have to have your technology tools available to you, but it's free in the sense that there's no travel involved, right? So it's a really great opportunity to just deepen partnerships that you may already have and bring those global perspectives to more students than who are able to actually physically travel. And then I'll just quickly mention a few points. So ACE is the American Council on Education, which is a very important association in the US that follows trends and advocates for policies that support higher education. One of their areas of focus is internationalization. And so they do studies regularly on what the trends are within US higher education towards internationalization. And so the last survey that they did came out about 1.5 years ago. And what this showed was that US universities are motivated to engage in internationalization for a few key reasons. One is to prepare our students to work in a global economy. Another is to diversify our campuses and diversify our student experience. And of course, to promote enrollment and revenue, which you can't avoid these days, right? And some of the priority activities that US universities report are student mobility, so both inbound and outbound student exchanges and enrollment, internationalizing the curriculum, which would include things like virtual exchange, for instance, or having guest lecturers, maybe a faculty member from Greece goes to the US and does, a short stint of teaching abroad. And then another important component of internationalization is international partnerships. You can go more. So a few important higher level context here for you to understand is that we are, right now the conversation is really focusing on the idea of global learning for all. So if you remember, I said that only about 6% of the entire undergraduate population in the US studies abroad. It's frustrating because it's over all the years, the needle is moving very slowly. But we know that it's so important for US students to be able to develop international perspectives, to understand how the world operates outside the US. So we're asking ourselves, first of all, why aren't more of them going abroad, right? But then also, how can we reach those who aren't? So we're really looking at myriad of ways to have our students engage in these types of international education activities, particularly to reach diverse and underrepresented students. So certain ethnic minorities have traditionally not participated in study abroad as much. Students who we consider first generation, so the first student or first person in their family to go to college, traditionally don't study abroad as often. Students with high financial needs. So we really have to think about how are we creating these experiences in a way that all students can avail themselves of them, because clearly the traditional method hasn't reached the majority of students. And we're really focusing on the student learning outcome rather than just the experience in and of itself. So there's a lot of intentionality behind what are we trying to have the students learn through this experience abroad, or even in the classroom. So what that translates to, again, is that we're seeing more of these short custom programs taught in English with these sort of curated academic and engagement or immersive opportunities. So things like research, fieldwork, internships. A few other trends that are, I think, really important for you to understand if your intention is to host more US students for study abroad programs is some of the pressures that we're facing in higher ed in general. So there's a large debate right now in the US around what is the value of higher education. You probably are aware that it is very expensive for our students to attend college in the US. And so we have seen over the years that students who come out of college have accrued tremendous debt and then aren't necessarily getting jobs that are at the level that they really should be getting. And so there's a lot of pressure right now on universities to really make sure our students are graduating in the 4 years that it should take to get a bachelor's degree, that they're not accruing debt, not taking classes that don't count towards anything, and that they are really well prepared for a good career and gainful employment. And so those two things really impact how we are being asked to design our study abroad programs. It sort of has to fit that ethos. And then I'm sure that you see this on your end as well, but we have seen a big uptick in the number of students who are reporting or who are showing signs of mental health concerns. So we have to, those are things we have to be able to support on our own campus, but also when the student goes abroad, we have to make sure that we're able to, and our host universities are able to support students who may have mental health issues. And then issues around diversity, equity, and inclusion, and also the different identities that students hold. So whether they are of a racial or ethnic minority, are in the LGBTQ community, are a student with disabilities and need certain accommodations. We really need to make sure that the experiences that we are providing to our students and when they are received abroad, that there are support structures in place to help students, no matter what their particular identities are, to help them have a successful experience. I just wanted to quickly, just in case, I don't know what you know, so I hope I'm not telling you anything that you already know, but I think it's important just to remember the vast diversity of institutions within the United States. So we have over 4,000 universities and colleges, many of which are public, meaning they receive their funding or partial funding. Nobody receives all their funding, some funding from their state. And even though I think there are only around 600 or so public universities in the US, they enroll over 60% of students who are in college. So you are more likely to receive students who attend a public university. The private universities, there are many more of them, but they tend to be smaller. Many of them tend to focus on more of teaching rather than research. They tend to have a liberal arts focus. So that's something to think about, when you're considering who to partner with. You want to ask yourself, would it make more sense for my university's, identity and our goals to partner with a research-focused university, which would give obviously more opportunities for your faculty in addition to your students? Or would it make more sense to partner with a small liberal arts college who may have more of a social justice or maybe a religious affiliation or a service orientation? So, every university and college has its own, personality and mission and ethos. So it's important to keep that in mind when you're considering who you want to partner with. We also have HBCUs, which are historically Black colleges and universities, MSI, HSI, which are minority serving and Hispanic serving institutions. So this again goes back to recognizing the diversity of the population within the United States. And these are institutions that are specifically serving these historically underserved populations. And so that is also something to consider is, when we think about having all of our students have international opportunities, these populations in general sometimes have additional barriers to their participation. So that is something for you to consider too in terms of your partnerships. Do you want to try to partner with an institution who has a more of a specific population that they serve? And then we also have a very strong community college ecosystem within the United States. Those are the two-year colleges, and those, although those haven't traditionally been the institutions who have had a lot of international activity, there's a real push for the community colleges to also internationalize and to really give those students who are typically non-traditional, so adult learners, people who maybe have families and jobs but have gone back to university to finish their degree, people with maybe lower financial means. These are also students that we want to make sure have an international opportunity. And so that's a population for you to also think about. And even in terms of perhaps if you want to create a dual degree, sometimes universities will partner with a community college because those are typically much cheaper tuition rates. So you could even have your students enrolling in a community college for a fraction of the cost of going to a traditional college like Princeton, for instance. But it's much lower cost point. I don't want to spend a lot of time on this, but I just wanted to point out that in our academic system, we have, the degree is comprised of the major credits as well as this idea of general education. So all students, regardless of what university they attend, all bachelor's degrees are structured in the way that there's a core set of classes that everybody has to take, like math, science, history, arts, ethics, etc. And then you also have your major classes. And I think that is something that really is different from a lot of other educational systems where maybe at a bachelor's level, you're only taking classes in your special field without what we would call these elective classes or gen eds. So that impacts then what the student, it gives them somewhat more freedom in terms of what they can take when they're abroad. But at the same time, I was mentioning that there is a real pressure to ensure that our students are graduating on time. So not taking more than 4 years or 8 semesters to finish their degree. And so that introduces a level of rigidity in how much flexibility the students have in choosing the courses that they take when they go abroad. So from our end, when we are looking at creating programs in partnership with the university and then advising our students on what options they have, the number one thing that we look at is, are the classes abroad going to directly count towards something in your degree? Because if it doesn't, a student is very unlikely to participate in that. So what that means is from the beginning, before we would even, agree to have a partnership, well, at least for student mobility purposes, we would work with our faculty members to sit down with your faculty members and look at the curriculum, right? So does the curriculum between these two academic majors match? Where is there alignment that might allow our student to come and take your classes at this particular time and then apply that back to their own degree? And I think this is also why it's more popular now for our students to do programs that have been created by our own faculty, because they know that class will definitely count towards their diploma. And so then what happens is they might come to your campus the program is offered in conjunction with your university, but the class is actually something that's being taught by our professor. So these are all the things that are kind of contributing to this trend that we're seeing. You can go for it. Again, super complicated slide, not going to spend a lot of time on this, but I did want to just point out that the vast majority of students who are enrolled in college in the US are receiving federal financial aid, which are either loans or grants. So grants don't have to be paid back. Loans obviously do. And this is highly regulated because this is at the federal level. So that means that there are restrictions that both the individual receiving the aid as well as the universities, that we have to follow whenever our students are getting federal financial aid. And so it really comes back again to this idea of the government does not want to give funding for students to take classes that are not related to their degree. So again, there's this additional layer of checking that whatever the federal financial aid is being used for is directly contributing to the student's degree. So that's not something that you have to worry about, of course, but that's what's happening on our side of things, where why it's so important that you probably get asked questions by your US partners about, how can you give us all the details about your classes, or can we see your syllabi, or really trying to understand the curriculum, because this all has a direct impact on the student. Go for it. Another totally different topic, but is really vital to this conversation, is what student services are being offered to a study abroad student. Now, I've heard before that US students can be kind of needy, and that probably is true. But the reality is that many of our students, especially as we continue to try to diversify who participates in study abroad, a lot of these students have never traveled abroad before, or maybe have never even left their home state. The institution I worked at before, it was in rural Michigan, and many of our students who attended college had never even been to a city larger than 40,000 people, let alone get on a plane and fly to a foreign country. So a lot of our students really need extra support in navigating what that abroad experience is going to be like. And so oftentimes, if we're talking about something that's more of an exchange program or a direct enroll where they're taking classes at the foreign university, having some kind of academic advisor who can help them understand what the academic system is like, how the courses are structured, what the teaching style is, where they can go to get extra assistance, is hugely important for them to have a successful experience. Also, I know it's not always the tradition. Like in the US, most of us are residential campuses, so we have dorms that are right, on our property. I realize that in many other countries, that's not the norm. You may not have student residence halls, but whenever a student is coming to study abroad, it's very complicated for them to try to figure out, let's say, how to rent an apartment on their own. So the more you can do to either secure the housing for them or help them really understand how to secure student housing, that facilitates the experience a lot. And then also helping them just get out of their bubble and meet local students. Oftentimes study abroad students will stick together among themselves because I understand that feels safe, but part of the experience too is meeting local students. So to try to facilitate those opportunities really helps them have a better experience. Again, not going to go over all of these details, but I did want to really emphasize how important health and safety and the general concept of risk management is in our world. So the US does have, it's true, we have a reputation of being fairly litigious, and it is what it is, but there is a huge burden, huge onus on us, on our side, to make sure that we are trying to foresee what might happen to our students abroad, so not sending them to countries where something is likely to occur. Even vetting, the housing that they'll be in, the types of activities that they may or may not be allowed to participate in, because we have a really strong tradition, this idea of duty of care, that we should make sure that we are not putting our students in potentially unsafe situations. And we also have a variety of federal mandates that we have to comply with. So things around, you don't need to know all this, but things like Title IX, Clery Act, these all have to do with protecting students from sexual misconduct, reporting crimes that might occur abroad. So these are all additional expectations on us, that this is why you may get questions from potential or current partners in the U.S. to say, do you have reports on crimes that have happened near your campus? Or, do you have someone who's available for 24 hours a day to help with a student emergency? Because this really is the expectation that is on us. And so then we have to know that the partners who we work with abroad are able to help us fulfill these expectations. And then just a few words on managing student expectations and student behavior. Again, a lot of our students haven't gotten to travel abroad before. And I don't know, for those of you who have traveled abroad, especially maybe outside of Europe, the first time you went somewhere that was different, you probably were like, oh, well, this is weird, this is different. And so a lot of times, it's not right or wrong, it's so different than what you've experienced in your life that your first reaction is to like, I don't like this. And so we do see that students might have, not everybody, but some students might have this shock of, I'm used to having air conditioning all the time, even in winter, and why can't I have air conditioning in my room abroad? Or, we have a lot of students with dietary restrictions, or they're vegan, or they have allergies, and, they expect that they should be able to get the same sort of accommodations that they're used to having at home, which I know really varies by location. And we also have to think about, this is what we always talk about in our offices, is the idea of safety versus comfort. We are concerned with them being safe. Sometimes they are concerned with their own comfort, right? So we have to help students really understand what is vital versus what is a luxury. And so you just sometimes might see that they can be, might have expectations that are just unreasonable. But that is something that we try to work on, through our own advising and helping them even before they leave understand what this experience is going to be like, and to be open-minded and to understand that not everything is like the U.S., nor should it be. Good. How much time do I have?
Another 20 minutes.
20. Okay.
Yeah. With patience.
Yeah. Okay. Great. So this slide goes back to trends in the participation in different types of international experiences. So it relates to some of the initial statistics that I was sharing. So this was compiled last year by, I believe, the Institute for International Education. They surveyed U.S. universities to find out, particularly post-pandemic, what we were seeing in terms of study abroad. And so 55%, so more than half, of our students were participating in what we call faculty-led programs. So those are those short courses that are being designed and led by one of our faculty members, usually in partnership with a host university. Notably, only 6% of students were participating in a reciprocal or bilateral exchange. So I think this is the very traditional Erasmus model of, your student pays their home tuition, our student pays their home tuition, and then they take each other's spots. That is a really affordable way to do study abroad, at least, for your students. But that is just not the trend these days of how study abroad is occurring. So not to say that that can't happen, because it does happen, but it only is really relevant to a small number of students. And if we're talking about, your ways that you can increase the number of US students that you receive, I wouldn't rely solely on the exchange model. I would really think about things like hosting faculty-led programs, or the 10% of non-exchange programs where students take classes with local students. That would be, we call it direct enroll. You may call it free mover, but it's essentially where, you know, the student pays you directly, whatever tuition you set, to come and take classes with you. And that way there's no, sometimes the idea of a reciprocal exchange just doesn't work for whatever reason. But that still gives our students the opportunity to come study with you. Can you go back just for one second? And then also notice that, you know, internships, research, field work, clinical rotations, those are also represented. So I would encourage you to think about what are the different, and you might not be able to accommodate all of these, and that's perfectly fine, but just to show that there is a variety of opportunity and how you might think about hosting international students. So if you are, you know, if you have a particularly strong, let's say, research program, or, you know, classics in archaeology are really popular here. So, you know, maybe you design a custom study abroad program in the summer that takes students out into the field. And some of you probably already do this, but, you know, things like that are also very attractive. It goes beyond just the traditional sitting in the classroom experience. I just wanted to quickly say a couple words about each type of study abroad program, just because this might be foreign terminology to you. So I just wanted to make sure that you know what I'm talking about. I've already mentioned this a couple of times, but what we call faculty-led, or sometimes on your side, you might call it custom-made programs. This is where you are either, there's two ways this could happen. You're either faculty from our university is designing this short course, and then they may ask you, like, hey, can you help us identify housing and arrange local transportation and recommend some guest lecturers or sites that we might be able to visit? And then we, you know, we would pay you for that, of course, for those services that have been provided. And then that helps, that takes some of the burden off of our faculty from trying to design a program in a country that they're not super familiar with. Also gives them exposure to your campus, and then they pay you, you know, for those services rendered. Or another option is you could create just a cohort group program that is solely taught by your own faculty, but is specially designed to receive international students, particularly over the summer. Those two things are what we tend to see most students participating in, and that is also a way for you to create some revenue for your, you know, for your university, as well as you could use that perhaps to provide scholarships to your own students to study abroad. This is a big part of the study abroad industry in the US, is this idea of third-party providers. So these, and you may already be familiar with them or not, but they are independent organizations. Some are nonprofit, some are for-profit, but they basically, we partner with, so US universities partner with third parties because they have more resources and local networks to put together study abroad experiences than we might have, you know, through our own staffing on our campuses. So they're essentially an intermediary who helps create the international experience, and then we pay them, or the student pays them for that experience, and then the students are able to transfer the credit back to our university. And the reason why this is appealing to so many students and universities is because they are able to create all those things that I was talking about, like the support structures, the being able to support students from different, you know, with different needs, identifying the housing. Those are all things that then they do. They take the logistical and sort of student affairs burden off of us. Of course, that comes with a cost for the student, but it gives us peace of mind to know that this organization understands how to work with U.S. universities and provide those types of health and safety and programmatic elements that we are really looking for. But what this means for you is oftentimes third-party providers will work with local universities abroad to enroll the students who come through them. So this could be an opportunity for you to look at, are there third parties who would want to partner with you to help you enroll more international students, but they provide some of those support services. I can't speak to who may or may not want to do that because these are obviously independent businesses, but that could be an opportunity for you to explore. Again, bilateral exchanges, I think, are what most of us are used to. So this is where a student on both sides takes each other's place, typically lasts for a semester or a year. These are tremendously beneficial, I think, just from a personal growth standpoint, but also have challenges in the sense that, there has to be, well, for instance, your student would have to have the right amount of English to come and enroll at one of our universities. You would have to have enough classes in English to help our students have an entire, semester of courses available. Actually, move forward. And so we know that there just sometimes are just practical obstacles to making this something that the majority of students will participate in. Even things like the differences between ECTS credits and American credits. Or oftentimes European partners want to send their graduate students abroad, but we want to send our undergraduate students abroad. So for these reasons, I think this is why the exchange model just has been decreasing in popularity. Although it is cost effective, it's just not really something that will ever, I think, be for the masses, at least from our end. And then the experiential programs, I already mentioned this, but something that I think is important to note is when I was talking about the fact that we want to have more to diversify the students who are participating in these programs, what we have seen is that more underrepresented students, so let's say racial minorities or students with high financial need, they tend to be attracted to these types of experiences because they can directly see what the career value is for them. So if it's an internship abroad or some kind of research or independent study that directly relates to their major, it's easier for them to understand why this is relevant to them because it's something they can put on their resume and talk about in an interview. And sometimes that's the thing that really makes the difference for a student to decide to go abroad or not. So again, I would encourage you to think about whether you have the capacity or could develop the capacity to host some kind of internship or community engaged experience on your campus. And then virtual and hybrid programs are something I would really, really encourage you to consider because as I was saying before, this is a very low cost way of helping your faculty develop relationships with our faculty to really, even in terms of your own, let's say, brand recognition abroad, this gets, your university's name out there in the US. It helps our students get exposed on both sides to different cultural perspectives. And it can still be a part of a travel program as well. So what you could do is, let's say you have during, say, a spring semester, some overlapping modules between your course and a US course. Students work on a project together, and then maybe there is 1 week follow-up travel, let's say our students to you, and then the students have already gotten to know each other, so then they get to meet in person, and it makes it such a more richer experience. Because it's not just that one-off, week, but it's like there's something building up to it. Now, this does require training on your faculty's part, but I think it's something that really enhances the overall international experience on both sides. And then again, with graduate programs, many of you, if you have research programs, probably already do this to some extent, sending your students abroad to do research. But what is nice actually about grad programs is that they actually tend to be less restricted. All the things I was just saying really relate more to undergrads. With graduate students, they have more flexibility, let's say, because they have to do so much research. They could easily do a few weeks or a semester abroad of research, and then that doesn't really involve registering for any credit, and so it's tuition neutral. And we know it's so great for their own, experience and development as a future academic. And on the U.S. side, there is a particular visa category that allows us to host your students for research or either postdocs, research or scholar positions, where they don't have to pay tuition. So this is something to really look at in terms of, because you could even have like an exchange between graduate students. I put it in quotes because there's no tuition being involved, but you at least know that you have that mutual, you've determined that we have these two academic programs that really complement each other, and there's a real desire among those faculty to host each other's students in their labs, let's say. So I've seen this work really well at the grad level. I mean, of course, it's specific, right? So you have to you really have to involve your faculty to determine, who would be the right academic partner for them to swap researchers with. But once they've done that, it's fairly easy to have that mobility. And I think we all know about joint and dual degrees. What I will say is joint degrees are not really favored at this point in the U.S. because they're very difficult to administer. There's many layers of approval that have to happen, both from our own university as well as our accreditors, because you're basically saying these courses from abroad are directly counting towards our own degree, and there's a lot of restrictions. Dual degrees are much simpler to administer, so it could be one way or two ways. So you could have, let's say, your students or our students are essentially transferring credit, and then also receiving your degree, because some of those credits they've taken at home count towards your degree. Or it could be two ways, where both students on both sides have the opportunity to complete their degree abroad. I think one thing though, they're not that hard really to set up, again, as long as you have the curricular alignment. But what I've seen is, at least from the US side, there's not always a desire on the student's end to complete the dual degree. They seem, at least on the US side, seem more interested in just completing the degree at home. And I see more interest from the foreign students wanting to come to the US to receive the US degree. So you might not find reciprocity in that, but that doesn't mean you can't pursue it. I think it's just something to be realistic about. And I mean, I know there's a lot of concern about funding. If this is happening at the graduate level, then there may be, opportunities for your students to receive graduate assistantships, which typically come with, we call it tuition waivers. It doesn't mean there's no tuition, but it means they pay the in-state tuition rather than the international rate of tuition, so it can be cheaper. But if you're receiving a graduate assistantship, then there's usually a stipend as well. So at the grad level, there's usually more funding opportunities. At the undergraduate level, the reality is, at least if you're a public institution, we are not able to make a lot of accommodation in terms of tuition discounts. However, for international students, I should say, but many universities have special scholarships for international students. So they may not, have to pay the entire cost of the tuition if they have a certain, grade, GPA, history. They may be, they may qualify for special scholarships that would at least make it cheaper. So can you, I don't know what's next. Can you go forward?
Key stakeholders.
Go forward to partnerships. Okay, so for time, I'm going to skip forward to some slides about partnerships because I know that's something that you're interested too. How do we identify partners in the U.S.? Unfortunately, there is no simple solution for this. It really does involve having, taking the time to think about what are you trying to accomplish in terms of partnerships? What do you have to bring to that? What do you have to offer an international partner, particularly in the U.S. context? Are you, like I was saying before, are you trying to work with a particular type of institution? Do you have certain academic areas where partnership makes more sense right now? You have to really first know what your own goals are and your own criteria are for partners, and then do some research on who those might be. And because that's what we do on our side too. The office I work in, we have 2 people who are devoted to international partnerships and agreements because it's a lot of work to sort through all of this. So the trend in the US right now is to be more strategic. I mean, 20 years ago, there was a real trend in signing MOUs, memorandum of understanding, with everybody all the time. And there's no harm in signing an MOU, but there's also no real point, at least on our side. If it's not actually leading to a fruitful activity, then there was no point in doing that. So we in the US are trending more towards being more discerning in terms of who we're partnering with, and then trying to have more multifaceted activities with a smaller number of partners rather than having 200 partners. So what I would encourage you to do is to first really do that strategic thinking internally, and then through networks like NAFSA and like the European version of NAFSA, the EAIE, and other global networks like that's how you can really start to connect with other potential partners and have those conversations about whether or not that might be a good fit for you. I think the one point I'll make on this slide is that oftentimes faculty are the ones who already have a network, either through research or maybe because they studied abroad for their own schooling and have colleagues. And so that can be a great way to make those initial connections. But at least, in our side, and I think that this is probably will be true for you too, as you expand internationalization, is you really need to have the international education infrastructure in place. Because you're going to have staff who can really work to sustain that and work through the details. It's too much to expect a faculty member to take all of this on themselves. We want to let them focus on the academics and the research, and then have staff who know how to deal with all the administrative and bureaucratic things that come with international partnership. Can you go to the global brand? So I realize we are running out of time, but you will receive these slides so you can see what you missed. But I did just want to put out there that when you're thinking about how can you get more brand recognition, I mentioned already NAFSA. There's also a entity or organization called Forum on Education Abroad, which is a study abroad specific professional association in the U.S. They are hosting their every other year they have a European conference, and they're hosting it here in Athens in October. So they're participating. So that will be excellent, relatively low cost way for you to go and meet with. There'll be many Americans there. There'll be people from the third party providers there. So it'll be a really great introduction to this world of U.S. study abroad, as well as, starting to look for potential partners. So it's really great, like happenstance that conference is happening here at the same time that we're having these conversations about how you can expand your global opportunities. So I think we're going to wrap it up there to see if you have any questions before we go into the NAFSA specific session. Talk for 3 hours.
So actually I'm blown away.
Yeah.
Because in less than 1 hour you covered all the dimensions and topics and issues related to internationalization strategy. Thank you very much. It was really insightful.
Yeah.
So we have 3 minutes break, and then we'll be back with the NAFSA session.
We stay on this link, right?
Yeah. We can use the same link. Yeah. So, as Jennifer pointed out in the first session, international events, conferences, and exhibitions like NAFSA and EAIE provide the ideal platform, ecosystem, and environment in order to help universities from around the globe find the right partners and get inducted in international education and global engagement. So, given the fact that Greek universities, a Greek delegation from Greek universities is going to be present, is going to participate in NAFSA 2024 in New Orleans. What are the benefits and what Greek universities should expect from this groundbreaking event? The floor is yours again.
Thank you. I am actually really excited to talk about this. It just so happens that in addition to my day job, I am also the chair of one of the NAFSA, what we call knowledge communities. So essentially, I'm a chair of a NAFSA committee. And so I'm really involved in NAFSA's initiatives. And I can tell you that one of the goals of NAFSA is to really reach well, it already is global, but to continue to include and invite international global audiences to participate in NAFSA. We want it to be a truly representative organization and representative experience for everyone who works in international education. So I think that it is really, really timely that the delegation is going to attend. I hope that if you are considering it, but you're not sure yet, that after the presentation, you will think about perhaps attending, because there are several opportunities that I will talk about. So they asked me to talk about demystifying NAFSA, which I think is a great term because it can be kind of overwhelming. So, so if you've never attended NAFSA, it's both a conference and an expo hall. And every year there are about 10,000 people who attend from universities around the world. It has many components. So the expo hall, of course, is where for instance, the study in Greece booth will be. So the expo hall has everything from universities around the world, different governmental and non-governmental organizations. So for instance, like Fulbright has a table where you can get information, different vendors like travel providers are there. So it really is the one place where you can go and talk to people for anything you might need or want to learn about working with international student mobility. So even just from the personal learning side of it's a great opportunity for you to just see how others are doing this, but also to brand yourselves, to look for partners, obviously with the US, but also in other countries, because it really is, it attracts, I don't know how many countries, but I mean, it's an extremely international event. So in addition to the expo hall, which is open for the whole week, it'll open Tuesday and closes on Friday. So you have a lot of time to walk around and browse. There are also workshops. So these are, 3 or 4 hour in-depth learning opportunities for you to learn about best practices and do some skill building. And then there are also sessions, so shorter, 50-minute is what most of them are, opportunities to hear from people from around the world about unique programs that they're doing, how they've overcome challenges in this space. So it's a great way to build community and learn about some ways of doing this, learning from others who have been there before. And then there are also many other just networking events. So what we call open dialogues. So it's more like roundtable discussions about timely topics, a variety of speakers, networking receptions, etc. So one thing I think that's important to keep in mind is that most attendees are people who are like myself or like the Study in Greece colleagues, or yourself. So it's people who work in the administration of international education. It's not really focused on faculty. I mean, sometimes faculty have dual roles where they teach and then also are involved in the administration of a program. But this is not, if you ever go to academic conferences, this is not an academic conference. It really is focused on the practicalities, the how do you do this part of it, right? So so it's a great way to really make connections with those of us who are actually making this happen. It's not high level abstract, it's very practical. But it is very large, so you have to plan in advance, and I will give you some tips. And so what I've also done is I've asked NAFSA to provide some information as well. So what this is, it's a combination of information that comes directly from NAFSA, as well as just my own advice from having attended, like, I think I've been to at least 15 NAFSAs. So a couple things to note. There are a few purposes of NAFSA. One is to, as they call, enhance connections in the field. So this is where you're basically finding your people. So whether it's a knowledge community, which is what they call, this is a term they use for the different sectors, right? So education abroad, international student services, teaching, learning, and scholarship. There's different tracks. So you can find your people, so to speak, by identifying with the knowledge community, go to the open meetings, going to workshops. This will really help you find people who are doing the same work and learning best practices. There also are poster sessions, which are easy because you can just browse. It's a great way to connect with individuals. And there's a bookstore, so you can also purchase books that will help you create a partnership strategy, learn more about the role of faculty in international education, learn more about risk management. They'll have materials on pretty much anything you can think of. And then I think the primary reason why you want to go is to develop institutional partnerships. And so this I mean, I'll be honest, even from the US side, we try to send as many staff as we can to NAFSA because it's cheaper, obviously, than sending our staff all over the world because everyone's coming there, right? So it's where you really have the opportunity to meet with representatives from universities. And I'll get into how you can do this and go before. So it's really important to prepare. I guess they can get a copy of this. This is a live link. But NAFSA actually has a web page on how to prepare for the conference. And they are actually making available several things. This is for anybody who is registered. So it's something you should definitely take advantage of. In May, they're going to have a virtual orientation that you certainly could attend. And then on site on the Monday of that week, which happens to be Memorial Day in the US, but but we work on the holiday for some reason. They're having an orientation specifically for international attendees. All right, and then later that day, there'll be so people for whom it's their first time attending NAFSA, there'll be another meeting on that same day. So that would be a great way to kind of orient yourself before the madness starts. But you also have to do planning before the Monday of the conference week. So you can go for it. So the link there is the actual program. So this is where you can see all of the sessions and workshops and who will be attending. Well, you have to register to see who's attending. They don't make that public, but this is where you will go to kind of learn everything that will be happening at the conference. And then there's also an app that you could download if you want to use that. But essentially through these tools, once you're registered, you can actually send messages to other attendees, see the list of who else is exhibiting and who, so what school and country people are who will be in attendance, so you can really start to do that outreach in advance. And I highly recommend that you start scheduling meetings at least 3 to 4 weeks in advance, because people's schedules get really full very quickly. And so if there's a particular university that you really want to meet with, I would be reaching out in early May to set up those meetings. And the great thing is, because you'll have a booth, you can use that as sort of the anchor. So you could say, it's a huge hall, right? And until you're there, you don't even know how it's laid out. So it's really impossible to say, meet me at the Starbucks. Like, you don't know where anything is. So it's great to just be able to say, meet me at the Studying Greece booth. You can maybe share some preliminary information about why Greece. And then, so it just kind of brings more attention to Greece in general to make that your meeting point. And then from there, you can figure out where you want to sit. But this really how you get the most out of NAFSA goes back to the idea of your partnership strategy. So what I was just saying when I was wrapping up is you really want to think about, who do you want to partner with? Do you want to focus on the big, what we call R1, high research activity universities? Is there Greek diaspora in certain parts of the United States, and you want to focus on those regions within the United States, right? Or do you know that your business school is really looking to increase partnerships, so you're going to try to find schools with similar business programs as yours? You have to kind of whittle it down somehow, and think about, what is it that you really want to get out of this conference? Because for some of you, maybe you're in the early stages of creating an internationalization strategy, and maybe you're not to the point yet where you know who you want to partner with. So for you, this could be an amazing learning opportunity to browse the different, study in Spain, study in Italy, Campus France booths, just to see what's going on, and how other schools are approaching this, and to attend sessions and really hear the nuts and bolts of how people are doing this work. That can help in itself, can be helpful for you to then take that back home and think about what is our internationalization and partnership strategy going to be. That in itself can be very valuable. But if you're at the point where you want to create partnerships, you have to then really be intentional, because there's so many representatives, and it's such a big a big space. You can't rely on chance, right? So and then it's important too to think about, what do you have to offer a partner? So the more specific your pitch is, or maybe your goal is simply to promote you have a really good English language or English taught program, and so maybe that's what you focus on. Maybe that's that's okay. You don't have to have everything all at once. So I would really determine what it is that you are offering to partners, and have really good, concise marketing materials to present, so that people can easily take that home and then follow up with you later. This probably is more so for my study in Greece folks than for the university representatives, but I'll share it anyway. So the expo hall is very big, and so you want to think about how can you make the most use of that space. So I understand that the intention here is for you individual university representatives to not have to stay at the booth, particularly because there's so much opportunity for you to network and learn from the sessions that they don't want you to have to be standing there. So you will have the representation from studying Greece at the booth for you. Although I would still really encourage you, it's like a must, that you have material about your institutions at the booth. So when people come by, they can quickly pick up something that gives them an overview of who you are and what you have to offer. I'll probably skip some of this because you may be interested, but they don't need to know. But can you go back?
No,
sorry. The one thing I really wanted to say though is, I think there's a tendency, at least in the past, people would bring like big brochures, big heavy books that had pretty pictures and the history of the university and a picture of the founder of the university, which is lovely, but people don't have space in their bags for that. So they'll probably just throw it away. So I would say, don't spend the money to create these big heavy books that no one's going to read or take home, but really focus on, something like a nice one-page thing, right, that you can easily put in your bag, or even something with a QR code that will take them to your website. These days, people don't even want to carry paper. So I would really think about how you can digitally share very concise information specifically with an international audience. So between that and then having your business cards, those are a couple of key things to keep in mind about the collateral that you take. Go ahead. This is a lot here, but you'll get a copy of this. But what I did was, I was thinking to myself, okay, if you've never been to NAFSA before, or if you're trying to, beyond what I've just told you, learn about, what is the landscape of US students going abroad, there are some really good sessions that I think would be interesting for any of you to attend. What I did was I actually went through the conference program and was looking at the titles and who's presenting, to try to give you an idea of, every day there are multiple sessions that I think would really help you understand more about how to work in this space, and also how to create your own strategy. So for instance, there are a couple of pre-conference workshops happening on that Monday and Tuesday at the beginning of the conference. These do come at an extra cost, but they are really, I've attended multiple, I've actually led several myself, really good in-depth advice on how to do things. So for instance, there's one about essentially revenue creation and internationalization, which is a very American topic, I suppose, but very relevant to you too. I think that that could be really good. And the people presenting this are excellent, high quality. I've seen them present before. I think you would learn a lot to help you think about how you might be able to generate some revenue through these programs. There's also a pre-conference workshop about building international partnerships. And, so I just tried to look for some things every day that might actually, give you some insight into how this works and to try to narrow it down. Because if you just look at the at the list, you might get overwhelmed by how many things are being offered. So, and so then there's a whole other page too. So as you can see, lots of learning opportunity. Okay. This information actually comes directly from NAFSA in terms of how to network. So they suggest things like visiting a community center. So for instance, I said I'm the chair of what's called the International Education Leadership Knowledge Community. So this is meant for people who are at, obviously, a leadership level, thinking about their internationalization strategy, their partnership strategy. So you might find that this is the place where you want to live within NAFSA, right? But there's also what's called the Education Abroad Knowledge Community, where it's people who, are actually doing the work every day of creating study abroad programs. So you might find that community really interesting to be a part of, because it will really expose you to the practicalities of how this is done, right? So that's up to you to decide, but it helps you sort of navigate in the menu of things to do if you identify with a particular knowledge community. And then they'll have lots of different activities that happen throughout the week. And I can't say enough about New Orleans. Whenever people say that they come to the United States, and they always seem to go to New York, Florida, and California, which are fine, but I actually think that New Orleans is a really, really interesting and important place to visit in the US, because it has so much historical and cultural, it just has a lot of history and cultural contributions to the US, that I think that in and of itself would be a really neat opportunity for you. And then I have asked NAFSA, because I know you're coming, meeting space can be hard to find, because there are session rooms, there's some tables, but it's not easy, especially if there's a large group, to find a place to go. So I actually asked NAFSA if I could offer this to you, and they said yes. So the room that we will have for our what's called knowledge community for the international education leadership, Casey, is a room that you could go to. So let's say the entire delegation, say the whole delegation wants to get together, and there's like 15 of you. This room is a place that you can go. You don't have to reserve it or anything like that. You can just go. I mean, it will be used for certain programs throughout the week, but it's, for the most part, it'll be empty. So as long as it doesn't overlap with when we have a program in there, you're welcome to use that space.
We know the key persons.
So that was an overview. I wanted to, if there are things that you think would be helpful for me to add, let me know. Happy to take questions. That was like kind of the initial information that I thought of, but you may have other.
It was great. It was an eye opener.
Yeah. Okay.
And now the floor is yours. We can open the mics, and you can engage in a fruitful dialogue with Jennifer. If you have any questions, please go on.
And thank you for listening to me talk for a while.
You have any questions from our participants? No questions. I have a question.
Yes.
During your stay in Athens, in Greece in general, you have the chance to meet and visit some Greek universities. What are the strengths? What are some of the characteristics and aspects that Greek universities should leverage and focus on in order to develop their internationalization strategy. And what do they have to offer to US students, for example?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So I have been able to visit a subset of public universities. So I haven't seen everything, but I've been impressed with the overall breadth of academic programs that are offered. The obvious commitment to quality and research is important too. I know we're talking about student mobility, but oftentimes this, at least at research intensive universities, the student mobility comes from, it's like a trickle down effect from faculty collaborations. And so what I've learned so far is that it seems like all the universities that I visited have some level of international engagement. I mean, some are more developed than others, but there's the desire to do that. I think it's a matter, I don't want to say just, but it's a matter of really creating the infrastructure and the strategy behind that. But I think that, number one, of course, is the importance of Greece in history, in architecture, in philosophy, and
we should emphasize culture and civilization.
Definitely, yes.
And student life as well.
Of course, yes. And being, things that we look for are safety, right? And a friendly environment.
And comfort.
Comfort.
And Wi-Fi and air conditioning.
And air conditioning.
It is everywhere and offered for free.
Yes, exactly, yes. Actually, it's so funny because it used to be like 10, 15 years ago, when you traveled, it was like impossible to get Wi-Fi. Now I feel like everybody has better Wi-Fi than we do. So. But no, so yeah, so things like cost of living, I have found it is less expensive here than in some other European cities.
That's true.
Yeah. So cost, safety, the fact that, I have felt very, very welcome. English, I mean, again, I'm not saying that everybody in the world should speak English because I don't, but for a student, that makes it a very easy transition.
It's the code.
Right. Because I think it can be very intimidating to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not even going to be able to figure out, how to go to the bank because I don't know how to say anything. So even to know that you can get around, without having Greek will help a student. Now, I do think that students should make the effort to learn something of the local language, but when we're talking about convincing a 19-year-old to do something, it will help them feel more comfortable about that. So yeah, I mean, I think that your obvious strengths are, what you're known for, the classics, but I don't think that you should limit yourself to that either. I mean, that's an important starting point. Also something.
Sorry for interrupting.
Yeah.
You can also mention what you told me before regarding the cultural awareness and inclusivity. When we were discussing about the University of Thrace.
Yes, so that's what I was going to say. I had the opportunity to go up north to Democritus
University of Thrace. Yeah.
That word, I keep saying it wrong. Democritus University of Thrace. And I was so glad that I got to visit an area outside of Athens because it's like that in the United States, right? Like people think of New York and Boston and LA, and not all of America is Boston and LA and New York, right? There are a lot of universities in smaller regions. And so, that's something that in and of itself, when, like, for instance, I just came from working at a university that was very rural, and it might have been too much for our students to go to some gigantic metropolitan area. They would probably feel more comfortable going to a smaller, regional type university, a smaller city. It makes them feel more comfortable. But one thing that we were talking about there, because I didn't, admittedly didn't know much about the region, was that it's a very multicultural area with religious and ethnic diversity, and I think those types of sort of societal or cultural themes are of interest to universities as well. I mean, clearly in the US, we are already a very multicultural country, but there's also tension that still comes with that. And so to be able to have maybe a comparative program about, how does that look here, and how do these populations live together or negotiate space, and compare that to, what happens in the US or other parts of the world, I think is very interesting and timely. So, looking for ways to leverage the university's location, their own history, and academic strengths goes a long way in terms of identifying who you are and what you have to offer. Because every university has teaching and learning and research, it's like we all do the same thing, right, in general. So it's really thinking about what makes them unique.
Of course.
Yeah.
And this is always related to the local culture,
Correct.
local community,
Yeah.
social background, of course, and geopolitics as well.
Yes.
Geopolitical position. But I'm a little worried because we do not have they're silent.
I've overwhelmed
They're
them.
not that active for Greeks. Do we have any question in the audience? I think you covered the
Covered
whole
everything.
spectrum,
Okay.
yeah, of internationalization and NAFSA.
Oh.
There's a question from Professor Zani from the University of Ioannina.
Actually, no, I wanted to thank you for taking the time and the effort to actually inform us and keep us on track. We're looking forward to having you in Ioannina as well.
Well,
That's
thank
an
you.
invitation. See?
Thank you. I really hope to come back. I have never been here before, and I've literally wanted to come to Greece my whole life. So I have
Perfect.
loved it. I will definitely tell everybody when I go home how wonderful it is.
Wonderful. Thank you.
So I would like to extend a special thank you to you, Jennifer, for this insightful presentation. And I would also like to express again my gratitude to our friends from the US Embassy for this great cooperation. Actually, I feel very comfortable here, and maybe the next event can be hosted here again. So I thank you all for attending, and stay tuned for the next SIG event. Many thanks, and have a nice day and month.